Kyla, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Kendra, how do you put a symbol in?
Oh, okay. If you left click on your screen, there should be the option, or right click, sorry. If you right click on your image, there should be a rename option that pops down. And then you can copy and paste the symbol into, yeah.
Copy and paste, okay.
And we're gonna give it roughly 2 more minutes. We'll start at 1:05. So I also know that this is very much lunchtime for many people, so don't hesitate to eat while we're doing this. If you needed someone to say that that was okay, this is me saying that that is okay. It's definitely my lunchtime, but I ate before now just to make sure that I wasn't eating and presenting at the same time.
I had already started eating, Kendra, but thank you for the support.
Definitely, definitely. All right, we are going to get started with everything that's going on. Anyone who just joined, if you want to share, change your name, I'll put all of that back into the chat for everyone who may have missed it from before. And if you copy and paste the symbols, that's how you get it into your name. And Kyla and I have the wrench. We are the Office of Sustainability leads for this one. And then we have 2 co-chairs, Giles and Anja, we will all introduce ourselves later on moving forward, but they have the stars beside their names. And so if you're really looking for someone trying to put faces to names, this is a good way to do that as well. But welcome to the first meeting of just the Community Working Group for RVAgreen 2050. We're really excited about this, especially this group. We'll get into this a little later on in the actual presentation, but our group is the group that makes sure that the plans that come out of RVAgreen 2050 are beneficial to the Richmond community as a whole and not just directed towards climate action in the city, but that we are increasing benefit in many sectors moving forward. And our agenda for today, we're going to start with introductions. Well, my introduction, and then we're moving to ground rules. And so we're going to help set what our virtual ground rules are going to be moving forward. This is something that we will build together in this meeting, and we will have at the beginning of every meeting to make sure that we understand we're all operating from the same path. And then we're going to get to know each other a little bit. We're going to spend a lot of time with each other during the planning of RVAgreen 2050. So it's really good to set to get to know each other, set expectations for who we're operating with and everything like that. And then we'll get into a little bit of detail on what is RVAgreen 2050 and how we're going to set the stage for equitable climate action and resilience moving forward. And at the end, we're just going to talk about our next meeting, which will be pretty exciting. We have a couple more meetings before the end of the school year. Or school year, wow, where am I? Before the end of the actual year. And so I'm gonna pass it on over to Kyla for our ground rules and group expectations.
Everyone, I'm hoping that everyone is familiar with ground rules. What we want to do is just ensure that everyone feels respected within this space. And so we have developed a couple here now, but we also want to offer the opportunity for you all to contribute to these ground rules. You can include anything in the chat, or if you would like to speak up and provide what you believe should be a ground rule for this group, please feel free to do so. But to start off, we want to make sure everyone is respected and is respectful of each other. We want to be present. I know that this is a 90-minute meeting, but throughout the process, we want everyone to be able to participate, and we want not for anyone to dominate a conversation. So just be mindful throughout the process that there are other people who may also have opinions. We also want to aim for consensus. So if it's something that you can live with, we can move on from that topic. Be open-minded, open to new ideas. If you're going to bring a problem to the group, make sure you're also bringing some form of solution so that we can work together to address that problem. And we also want to separate people from the actual problem. So if there is anything else that you would like to contribute, feel free to do so either now or throughout our meeting within the chat, or we'll give you a couple minutes now to give any ground rules vocally if you would like. All right, I think that was our 7-second thing. Maybe we should add that to our ground rules, that if there is 7 seconds of silence, we will move on to the next thing. So we're not wasting too much time. But I will go ahead and introduce myself, and we'll do a popcorn introduction. What I want you to do is provide your name and the organization or neighborhood that you are representing. I am Kyla Logan. I am with the City of Richmond Sustainability Office, and I do not live in Richmond, but I do work there. I'm going to go ahead and popcorn it over to Kendra.
Hi, I'm Kendra. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Office of Sustainability. I live in the Churchill neighborhood in the city of Richmond, and I'm going to popcorn over to Giles.
Hi, I'm Giles Garrison. I work at Parks and Rec, and I coordinate volunteers and help run the Workforce Development Program. And can I popcorn it? I'm going to popcorn it to Melissa.
I knew that was going to happen. Hi, my name is Melissa Guevara. I work with Groundwork RVA. I do youth programming there, and actually forgot whatever else we were supposed to say. That's it. I live in Richmond. I am currently in Carytown.
Melissa, you have to popcorn it to someone.
I'll go to Sarah.
Hey everyone, I am Sarah Shaughnessy. I work for the Richmond City Health Department. And I live in Richmond. I live in sort of the Jackson Ward downtown area. I will popcorn it over to Kate.
I'm Kate Rivara. I work with the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Community Facilities as the Community Garden Coordinator, and I live in the Randolph neighborhood. And I'm gonna popcorn it to Sarah Barton.
Hey y'all, thanks so much. My name's Sarah Barton. I work for BCU, and I live in the Union Hill neighborhood of Richmond. And sorry, I'm having trouble viewing all the participants. Let me just pull up everyone's names. I will popcorn it over to Stephanie.
Oh no, Stephanie, we can't hear you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, I'm Stephanie. I do not live in Richmond. I live in Chesterfield, but I work in Richmond at the Branch Museum of Architecture and Design. I think that's it. Popcorn, Bill L.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bill Lawson. I work with the Richmond Office of Emergency Management. We are the disaster level people. So we deal with the hurricanes, the big snowstorms, a lot of basically the stuff that when we get to that higher level of coordination being needed, that's where we come in. I've lived in Richmond pretty much my whole life. Right now we live over near Chippenham and Huguenot area. So we are officially Southsiders. Let's see, I will popcorn it over to, is it Jenny? Jenee? No?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Janae Pearson. I'm with the City of Richmond's Office of Community Wealth Building. I am also a native of Richmond, born and raised, currently in, I'm going to say, South Richmond, North Chesterfield area. And I will popcorn it to, let's see, JJ.
JJ, you're muted.
Thank you, Janae. My name is JJ Minor, and I'm the Community Development Officer for the City of Richmond. I'm a native of Richmond, born and raised here, and I live in the Churchill area, and I think I'm going to go ahead and popcorn it on over to Kelvin H.
Hello, I'm Kelvin Harris, and I work for the Office of Community Wealth Building. I am a Richmond native, but I don't currently live in Richmond. I grew up in the north side of Richmond and went to all of Richmond's city schools. And I'm going to popcorn it to John Kay.
Hey, I'm John Karusik. I'm with the Office of Community Wealth Building, and I live in Henrico County. And I'm popcorning it over to Travis.
Yes.
Hello, everybody. Sorry. I'm Travis Woods. I'm with the Office of Community Wealth Building. I do live in Richmond right now. I've been living in Richmond for the past 13 years in the Fulton area, but I actually grew up in Henrico. I don't know who I should popcorn it to, because I'm just getting on. I'm late, you guys. So I apologize, but I guess I'll pick Melissa G.
I already went, but I think Nikhil wanted to go.
Okay.
Hey everyone, I'm Nikhil. I used to live in Richmond till 2018, moved to India and just got back and live in Henrico. I used to work at Capital One, and I'm looking to transition to work on the climate change area. Excited to work with you all. And I'll popcorn it over to Dawn, I think hasn't gone yet. Javon, hello.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dawn Alexi. I'm actually not part of this group. I work with the Office of Sustainability, and I am one of the coordinators in charge of the Buildings and Energy Working Group and the Waste Working Group and the Transportation Working Group. So we will definitely be working together, but I'm just here to kind of listen and you know, make sure that all of our communications are kind of integrated from the start. So thanks for being here, and I'm just gonna kind of be in the background, but please ask me, speak up if you have any questions for me, let me know.
We can go to Anja.
Anya, and I am a museum district resident. I have been in the greater Richmond area for the last 22 years and a resident of the city for a year and a half now. And I'm also a co-chair of this group with Giles.
Lachelle.
Awesome. Hey everyone, I'm Lachelle Johnson. I'm representing the 1st District. I live right in front of Malvern Gardens, so no, I'm not the rich version of the 1st District. But my day job is with the Department of Taxation. And I will popcorn over to Javon.
Thank you. My name is Javon Bowles. I am currently in Chesterfield, but I'll be moving to the Carver neighborhood in the downtown area of Richmond soon. And yes, I think that is everything. So I'll popcorn over to Trina.
Thank you. My name is Trina Lewis. I am with the Richmond City Social Services and born and raised in the city of Richmond. Do not currently live in the city, but very invested in the city. So thank you. And is there anyone looking for names? I'm not sure anyone has left. Have we done all introductions?
Richard.
Am I last?
Richard.
Yeah.
Save the best for last. Hi, I'm Richard. I'm a Northside resident for about 10 years. I'm an educator. I work for a nonprofit that works for community colleges, and I have also been getting educated and trained in climate and sustainability as much as I can the past couple of years.
All right,
Got everybody right? So I don't have to popcorn, right?
Thank you everybody for providing your introductions. We're going to go into breakout rooms very briefly. What we're going to discuss in these groups are the things that motivate us to make Richmond more equitable, healthy, and resilient. If I'm not mistaken, Kendra's going to put those questions inside the chat, but please, communicate with each other. Let's not have too much quiet time, but also be mindful of other people's ability to speak as well.
Welcome back. Welcome back. I just couldn't tell if we lost some people or if some people just didn't come back from the waiting or from the breakout rooms yet. So this is my first time hosting a Zoom meeting. So I'm figuring this out as I'm going along as well. But is there anything that anyone would like to share from their conversations? You can share it verbally or you can put it in the chat that you think is really awesome for what we're getting ready to do, or something that you learned about your group that while you're talking to them.
I was really excited to hear from Nikhil about coming from Mumbai and his sort of like vision or perspective of what the world looks like when inequity is even more extreme and how we should avoid that, I think.
I was just really pleased with all the expertise among so many people, and more importantly, among all people, I feel there's a commitment to equity and to the city.
I was struck by in my group that there were several people who actually had experienced some of the inequities either growing up or moving. And then we have a good mix of people who are a little newer to the city, but it seems like we have a consistent agreement that this is very important, and yet there are plenty of opportunities out there to do some good things.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love all of that. And I really think that that really helps put set us up for talking about what RVAgreen 2050 is doing moving forward. So before we get into what we will be doing as a group, and we're definitely going to be working on taking a lot of this expertise and experiences with inequities and disparities in a variety of levels and trying to integrate all of that into our climate action plan. And if you've ever seen a climate action plan before, you know that historically they've not typically taken into consideration a lot of the historical and social inequities that exist within the area that they're focusing on. And we definitely want to make sure that moving forward, we embrace racial equity and other disparities that exist in the city of Richmond, because we don't just want to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, but we want to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions through other benefits within the city as well. And so we want to make sure that we're connecting our greenhouse gas reduction goals with community priorities moving forward. And we're definitely going to get into a lot more detail with that in this presentation here. But this current slide that we're on with our accomplishments, this is just kind of laying out where the Office of Sustainability in the city of Richmond came from. So the office was established in 2010, but honestly, Kyla, do you want to talk on this or do you want me to continue going?
You can totally talk about it.
Kyla, you got this.
Unless you really want me to.
No, Kyla, you got this.
All right. So yes, the Office of Sustainability was established in 2010. And there has been a lot of work that has been done in the city since then. We have conducted the first greenhouse gas emissions inventory that took place, if I'm not mistaken, in 2012, but it was for 2008. And I think from 2013 onward, we have conducted an annual greenhouse gas emissions inventory. As some of you may know, the first sustainability plan was RVAgreen. And so this plan that we're creating now is really building on that and building on it in a more equitable way. Some of the other things that we have accomplished was originally having our 80% greenhouse gas reduction goal. And we worked with a consultant in 2018 to develop some strategies to see what our emissions would look like if we kept doing things the way that we're doing them, or if we made some adjustments. But in 2020, this year, the city did decide to have the net zero resolution. And so we're in the process of trying to really find out what steps need to take place in order for us to reach a net zero goal. Throughout the process, we've also worked on the Climate Equity Index, which some of you may have heard about, but that's my little baby. I'd love to do mapping. So we'll also be discussing more about that throughout this presentation as well. But this is just a general outline of what we have done, and we'll be talking about where we're going later on.
Yeah, and so as I touched on before, we have the traditional approach for climate action and resilience planning. So while we will still be creating strategies for climate action and climate resilience, because the city of Richmond is experiencing climate change, we have been for a while and we will continue to be. So we need to make sure that we're still addressing a lot of those concerns and creating strategies to help us move through that path as well. But we also want to make sure that we're including equity as a major consideration and not something that comes in the second phase of the development of our plan, but something that is built in throughout the entire planning process. So for RVAgreen 2050, we have an integrated approach where equity is going to be considered in the climate action strategy planning and the climate resilience strategy planning. And throughout this, it's more cyclical, and we will be talking about, whenever someone is talking about climate action or climate resilience, there will also be the consideration of equity built into that. And so we have some members here with us right now, but we have our Racial Equity and Environmental Justice Roundtable. And these are Richmond residents that are bringing their lived experience to the planning process to make sure that we are not only addressing climate action, climate resilience, equity, but also something that is relevant to what Richmond residents are going through right now. And it's spoken about in a way that is relevant to what is happening in everyone's life. And so what we're going to do right now, this is going to be, we're going to go through climate action, climate resilience, and climate equity to make sure that we're all coming from the same background moving forward. We will also make sure that we're using the same terminology, and when we use some of these words, we mean the same thing, so that we're all coming from the same page. So moving into climate action, very basic. What is climate change? So climate change is more long-term versus weather. And it is human-caused emissions, especially from greenhouse gas emissions. That's one of the things that we're really focusing on with this process. But one of the best ways that I've heard this described is that climate change is like your personality and weather is your mood. So you have a long-term permanent thing that's going on, and then your mood is just what you're feeling in that specific moment. And so we don't want to look at weather and think that that's what the climate of the area is. Climate is something that is more long-term and studied over a longer period of time than weather. And so that's why even if it is cold one day, we can still say that climate change is happening, that global warming is happening, because it's been an increase over the average of time and not something that we're experiencing directly within that moment. And so climate change causes specific impacts, and especially what we're going to be looking at in the city of Richmond is that we are expecting and experiencing, as we speak, extreme heat, extreme precipitation, and increasing sea level. And that's something that we recently just reopened the flood wall. So we've definitely seen a recent example of how the sea level is rising here in the city of Richmond, and we had a very hot summer. And so we know that these are things that we can experience in our own personal lives, and it's something that is it's larger scale than just the individual experience, and something that we really need to consider in how we are planning to build out the city of Richmond moving forward. And so we want to make sure that we are addressing things like safety, health, economic burden, and food insecurity, and that we don't have displacement, and that we are on a government level integrating a lot of these things so that we can have public safety, improved education, poverty mitigation, and reduction in financial and credit risk. So these are things that we have to consider in our climate action plan, because these are some of the outcomes of free reign climate. And so we want to make sure that we are also considering those impacts, because those are the risks of continued climate change. And so what we have here is just a really good show of where we are going, where we've been, and where we're going with our greenhouse gas emissions and targets. So we are aiming for a 2030 reduction goal of 45%, and then by 2050, we want to be at 100% reduction. And you can see on the blue line, this is what we've been tracking since 2008. So we're on our way. We want to make sure we're continuing going down moving forward. And so the RVAgreen 2050 is really going to help make sure that we stay on target to meet our goals moving forward. And so the 100% reduction, or carbon neutrality, we are really just trying to make sure that whatever we produce through our energy supply, we are also offsetting in some manner. And whether that could be a variety of ways, this is definitely something that is going to come out of RVAgreen 2050 on how we're going to meet a lot of these goals. But this is not that we are not producing any sort of emissions, but that we are just, we're capturing and offsetting and making it to net zero directly. So where do our emissions come from in the city of Richmond? Most of our emissions are coming from building energy, and then we go to transportation, solid waste, and water and wastewater. So we're really looking at, we've broken down a lot of our groups into these specific sectors. So we have the buildings and energy group, our transportation group, and our waste group. And so this will be how we will separate out our plans moving forward. But in many ways, a lot of these, in a way that environmentalism moves, are integrated within each other. And so this is not just individual actions for each thing, but just a plan for each specific group. And so a lot of these things may move through each different groups, but we want to make sure that we are overall reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, and we can just see where we need to focus the majority of our attention. And we are also not only working on reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, but at this point, we are still at risk for climate change, even with reductions. So we also have to build in climate resilience. So what we have here is news articles about the impacts of the climate in the city of Richmond. And our most recent one is November 12th, the James River in Richmond could rise to its highest level since 1996. So these are things that we have to consider, especially when you live closer to the James River, to make sure that we are building a city that is resilient from flooding. These are things that, while on an individual level, many homeowners can maybe adjust for flooding, but there are some homeowners who can't adjust for flooding. And as the city, we need to make sure that we are building out this resilient space so that we can all live in without burden in the city of Richmond. We also know that it gets really hot. We have cooling centers that are open in the city of Richmond. These are things that we have to consider moving forward. I don't know, there's been a recent article from the New York Times over the summer about the urban heat island effect here in the city and how that lines up with redlining in the city of Richmond. So there's definitely clear disparities that exist within the way that our built infrastructure has been laid out. And these are things that we have to consider when we are addressing our climate action plan to help mitigate and to help build more resilient areas in the city of Richmond, to make sure that we don't have just one sector or one neighborhood in the city experiencing all of these climate burdens while other areas in the city of Richmond are flourishing during this time. We want to make sure that the benefit is spread evenly across the city so that we can have a resilient Richmond and a healthy Richmond, and not just healthy neighborhoods, but a healthy city. So where are we going with this? If we are expected, if we do nothing, that we are going to have an increase in temperature. If you look at where we were in the past, we were at 69 on average daily maximum temperature. We're expected to hit 75. That's a big difference between those two degrees. And we want to make sure that while we're moving in this direction, we want to mitigate some of that if we can, but we also want to make sure that we are planning for some of these things moving forward so that we don't have to invest in that when the time comes, but we can pre-invest in it so that we're ready moving forward. And so here are some of the risks. And so I think we've touched on some of this. When you have residential safety issues, like that's death. Like, we don't want people to experience death from climate impacts. We don't want people to have increased illness or chronic conditions or lose property or be displaced. Also, on a lower level, you have higher energy bills in some areas in the city of Richmond. And we as a city need to make sure that our energy bill disparity is not placed in one specific area of the city of Richmond. And I think we can all guess where all of this is going and what area of the city that we're talking about, because it's always the exact same areas in the city of Richmond that experience these disparities here. And we want to make sure that we as a city can continue to offer services moving forward, that our communication networks are working, our transportation and infrastructure systems work, and that people can continue to go to school and go to work and own their property and just have fun here in the city of Richmond. So I've been definitely interweaving equity into all of this before. And so it's clear that climate change is going to end up affecting some more than others. And why is that? It's because of racism, if we really get down to the basic part of it. We have a history of racial segregation in the city of Richmond. The way the city infrastructure has been laid out, there's been investment in more areas than there has been in other areas. And so we just need to make sure that we don't continue the process of concentrated neighborhood disinvestment, and that we are working to create equality and equity across the city moving forward. We want to make sure that all residents have access to things like affordable health care or transportation, that their neighborhoods are meeting their goals for their neighborhoods. We want this to not be a plan that is being forced down from the city of Richmond, but a plan that is being built out by the city of Richmond and the residents within the city of Richmond. We want to make sure that we are meeting priorities moving forward while also reducing our greenhouse gas emissions so that we can create a city that is going to not have these disproportionate climate impacts moving forward. There's definitely places in the city that have less green spaces, less access to transportation, whether that be public transportation or just walking and biking options. I talked about higher energy bills that in some neighborhoods, and there's areas that have an increased exposure to pollution and airborne allergens, which is actually something that the Science Museum is currently studying right now to really help identify where air quality differs on a neighborhood base in the city of Richmond. So we're definitely moving towards getting a lot of this information to make sure that we can identify where we need to focus investment moving forward, and not just continuing to put investment in the same places. And what we have here is, you can see that with our climate equity index map, vulnerability score here, which is this big one with the red, that a lot of the darker areas are going to be areas in the city of Richmond where we have a lot of Black and brown residents. And these are the same areas that light up for any sort of disproportionate impact in the city of Richmond. And so we want to make sure that we're taking in a lot of their community priorities in these areas, so that we are addressing not only climate, but also some other things that they may have been trying to work on moving forward with the city of Richmond. In our planning process, we have for to make sure that we have equity moving forward, we have, as I mentioned before, our Racial Equity and Environmental Justice Roundtable. That group of residents will also be creating our equity tool. And so we will have either an equity checklist, a framework, or something where we can go through all of our strategies to make sure that racial equity is a consideration in the building out of the strategy. And we as an office have experienced racial equity training over the course of, well, half the office has only been employed since February, but during that time, there's been a lot of racial equity training. And before that, the office was experiencing racial equity training over the course of 2019. And in that, we also have had listening sessions with a lot of community-based organizations to really understand where community priorities lie and what kinds of questions we as the Office of Sustainability should be asking to meet the goals of an equity-based climate action plan. And then we still have our climate action, climate resilience with our technical experts we're going to have best practices. That's what our working groups are. For climate action, we have technical modeling coming in. And then for climate resilience, there's a risk assessment that's currently being done. And so we're going to have a lot of the technical things that you expect from a climate action plan still happening, but we just want to make sure that while we're taking in that information, we're also centering equity in the process. And so what does that look like? One of the things that we heard the most for community priority was that there was a lack of affordable housing in the city of Richmond. But how can RVAgreen 2050 touch on affordable housing? We don't work with housing, but what we can do is make sure that when we are addressing emission reduction, we're not unintentionally increasing housing prices at that time. And when someone is building out a house, we can make sure that it's resilient, it's weatherized for the future of the city of Richmond's climate, energy efficient, it's renewable energy. There are things that we can integrate within housing issues that are not directly related to housing access, but improve the housing market for everyone in the city of Richmond. So what we're really focused on is making sure that we have a universal goal and targeted actions. We are not trying to give one plan that hits everyone's needs. We understand that everyone is different and that we need to have different paths forward for different people in the city of Richmond. So when you look at this section right here for inequity, you can see that there's different barriers at different places for different people, or there could be someone with no barrier at all. And we want to make sure that we're providing the steps needed for every person to make it to the same goal, and that there's no barriers, whether they be intentional or unintentional on our end, that block a resident from meeting the goal of equitable climate action for a healthy and resilient Richmond. And like our whole process, if you've heard of, well, I hope you've all heard of Virginia Community Voice, because we were all in that racial equity training as our first meeting. So this should be a name that is known to everyone in this group. And we are really focused on making sure that when we talk about climate change and climate action, we're talking about it in a people-centered way. So when when we talk about climate action, for the most part, I don't like to talk about greenhouse gas reduction because that doesn't mean anything to most people. And so to talk about it in ways that connects with what people are facing on a personal level, and that we are really meeting individual needs and not just talking in one way for everyone, because we need to make sure that when we talk about RVAgreen 2050, when we're working on RVAgreen 2050, and that we are considering the different paths forward in that process. And so we will be centering equity. I feel like I've said that so much, but I think I really just want to make sure that it is there, that equity is what, especially this group, is focused on. We want to make sure that we are taking a lot of the strategies that we will receive from the other groups, and we are making sure that we are meeting our planning process and the community priorities at the same time. So that was a lot of information. Are there any questions about anything that was shared?
So you mentioned that the goal is to have a net zero carbon emissions. So that means what we produce, the carbon emissions that we produce, we're offsetting it. Would the next goal, just so that I have it structured in my mind correctly, would the next goal then be to not produce carbon emissions?
Kylie, you want to take that?
I honestly don't think that it is actually possible to not produce any form of carbon emissions. And so it's like really, from my perspective, it is really just trying to create a balance. Like us breathing in general is going to produce carbon, you know? And so, so I will go with no.
I guess, yeah, even like solar panels like manufacturing solar panels creates carbon emissions. So even renewable energy is creating carbon emissions. So yeah, I echo that.
I had a question that's sort of related. Kendra, you mentioned housing as a topic that maybe would be outside of this conversation, but I just wondered if that, I don't know if there might be policies developed around construction by another group or suggested by another group that would come through this subgroup, just because construction is such a huge emissions creator.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that we weren't going to be able to impact any of that with this planning process, so much so that more so that the Office of Sustainability doesn't directly interact with housing, the housing market within the city of Richmond, but we are definitely looking for policies that will impact what the housing market and the housing development in the city of Richmond looks like moving forward.
Well, speaking of construction, I mean, I think that the housing issue needs to be addressed, but I know from the Richmond 300 plan, there's a lot of government construction planned. Is that necessary? Is that something that's being looked at?
I don't know if, Dawn, I don't know if you're still there, but you got the buildings and energy section.
Okay, hi. So I don't have a great answer for you. That would definitely be something that would start with buildings and energy. And, you know, one of the green buildings is probably something that'll be discussed. And then building footprints, energy per square foot. And then if we're looking at how to decrease those numbers specifically, certainly fewer buildings would help. So I think that's just further along, you know, wait and see what they come up with in that group. But you guys will have the opportunity to then kind of send information back. And there's gonna be a lot of back and forth and a lot of, you know, cross-pollination going on. So that's a great example.
We'll have an opportunity before any of the construction of Richmond 300 begins to weigh in on that.
Before RVAgreen 2050 is finished, this group will critique any strategy that comes out of any of the other groups. And so the back and forth is that before we are publicly releasing any of the strategies from RVAgreen 2050, they have to come through this group and through the roundtable before they are released for public comment.
Right, but my question is about the Richmond 300 plan.
The timeliness of what's going on now.
Yeah, because I mean, there's plans to completely replace City Hall, for example, and so my question is that necessary?
So I'm hearing a lot of those concerns in my other groups too. They're like, but there's stuff going on now. We can't wait till 2030. So absolutely, the Office of Sustainability is still working with the other departments. We're still adding our input to everything else going on, and we're going to be trying to integrate and making this, opening up this opportunity for the projects to be community owned, so that you guys, if you have a great idea, let's figure out how to give that some legs and bring that to someone who can make that change. So I know that's not a perfect answer, but timeliness is definitely something I'm hearing a lot about. So we're evolving our processes to incorporate that.
In Richmond 300, RVAgreen 2050 is listed as a reference source for the Thriving Environment section. So it's not fully outside of what Richmond 300 is doing. So while this planning process is not complete until 2020, April of 2020, we are part of Richmond 300 moving forward.
Hello, this is Kelvin. I wanted to know whether, I guess from the, scientific side, is there a location yet I could go and read up a little bit on my own? Because some of the questions that came up just now is about specific projects. And like you said, for my frame of reference, I would like to know, I know just some basic science, like you said, us breathing in oxygen and letting out carbon and doing that. And then I'm kind of referencing some of the studies that I've seen yet because of the pandemic. One of the brighter sides with that, your air quality actually improved for a short period of time. But for my own self, is there a couple of sites that I could go to at least get a little bit more education, frame of reference on my side, so I know the right questions to ask in terms of things like that? Because particularly as it relates to construction and these pieces fitting together as far as equity and employment opportunities and stuff like that, yeah, my office is working on.
I'm happy to share some stuff with you moving forward, and I'll definitely make a note of that to send some articles for reference after this meeting, probably more so next week, but to help sort of build a lot of the connections between what we're doing in different aspects of other operations within the city of Richmond.
Thank you.
Kendra, you mentioned the equity tool that the roundtable is working on. Just do you know when they're releasing that?
The roundtable, the meeting is not until next week. So it will exist after that meeting. And then I believe either the next meeting that we have or the meeting right after that, we will then receive the equity tool and be able to figure out how to integrate that within our process.
Hey, Kendra, in my work, we work with a lot of institutions around equity, and we found that there's a lot of confusion about what that is, like how you specifically define it. I didn't hear it in your presentation. Do we need to come up with a kind of a pithy definition of what we mean by equity as we move forward, so that we don't create any kind of confusion for people who don't quite get where we're coming from?
Yeah, definitely. Part of the reason we currently do not have a definition of equity that we are going to use for this process, because it will be built out by our roundtable members. And so that is how, with the equity tool, a lot of the framework around equity moving forward will be definitely clearer in the process.
Okay, thanks.
Can you tell us a little bit about the plan once it's once we create one? Like, how is it then? Like, what is the process to get it implemented? How does it go through I guess the political process? If you will?
Yeah. So the plan in 2020 will be voted on by City Council to be implemented by the City of Richmond. And in there, in the planning process, we're building out a roadmap. And so this is more so a roadmap of very direct things that the city needs to do to continue along the path of meeting our 0% greenhouse gas emission rate by 2050.
Just to clarify, it's 2022, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Okay.
If anyone else has any questions, just one last one.
Yeah.
Are we also working with other cities? I know there are groups like the C40, and then I saw the Virginia group of clean cities, but just to share ideas and practices with similar cities.
The Office of Sustainability is part of a national urban sustainability directors network where we have regular conversation with other offices of sustainability across the United States and Canada about their climate action planning processes. And we have trainings that we all participate in together. So there's definitely we have a lot of conversations with other cities on how they've done their planning processes. And we've talked with other cities about things that worked really well for them or things that they're working on as well. So we're not the only city currently in the process of creating a climate action plan that's centered around equity. So this is definitely, we're also not part of the first cohort of cities creating a climate action plan centered around equity. So we are taking a lot of the learned experiences from cities that have already done it, and then we're constantly in conversation with other cities that are working on this process as well. Cool, okay. So we kind of talked about some of this in the beginning, but what we have here is this is going to be our next step in city planning. You can see a lot of the plans that have gone through the city of Richmond. We have our, we started with our RVAgreen sustainability plan, moving to Richmond Connects, which is our multimodal transportation plan, RVA H2O clean water plan, our Vision Zero action plan, the regional housing framework, Richmond's 300 master plan, the net zero resolution, which happened this year. And then in 2022, we will be done with our roadmap for RVAgreen 2050. And so we're building off a lot of these plans that are mentioned before to make sure that we are not, this plan is not operating within the sphere by itself. It is operating with the knowledge of these previous plans that have existed, and we're building off of all of this moving forward. And so just to see the overall mapping process of where we're going, we are currently here where the star is with the launch of the roundtables and the working groups. And so we are in basically the second of 4 phases. So we're starting to end our halfway through process. And so in this period of time, we will be developing out our strategies so that we can release them in 2021 for a March community-wide engagement for feedback on what we have. So in March, we'll have that feedback, and then we'll come back again after that to really take in a lot of the information that was shared with us from the community to make sure that we are really meeting community needs while also meeting our climate action and climate resilience goals. And then in 2022, this will go in front of the CEO, the CAO, the mayor, and city council for approval. And towards the end of 2022, the goal is to have a very specific and direct implementation projects that we are going to put in our communities that are on the front lines of climate change. So while we're going forward, we're going to talk about where we've been. And so I'm just going to shoot this on over to Kyla again.
Hello, everybody. All right. So one of the things that we have done was we conducted a vulnerability assessment, and we started with looking at the heat vulnerability because that is something that Richmond is experiencing. But we know that the vulnerability isn't limited to that. So we developed our climate equity index, which you all can explore on your own time. And if you need help navigating it, I can also assist. We looked at over 30 factors that increases a community's vulnerability to climate change. Some of these things are poverty, age, race, gender, disabilities, and the list goes on and on. But as Kendra said earlier, the factors impact many of the same communities over and over. So that's something that we definitely want to take into consideration as we are in this process, is like really taking into consideration these frontline communities. Kendra, you can go ahead and move on to go ahead and go to 33, and just to get a little view of what the Climate Equity Index looks like prior to going to the actual live link. You can move on. All right, so we're not only looking at climate impacts, but we're looking at vulnerability and risk. And so the communities and the built assets and natural resources that are highly vulnerable and at high risk, we want to really take those communities into consideration through this planning process. As I mentioned earlier, we did have the 80% by 2050 reduction goal that we worked with the consultant to model, and we're in the process of working on that net zero goal and seeing what strategies need to take place in order to reach that by 2050. And all that information is going to feed into this process. Back to you, Kendra.
And so over the summer, starting in April of this year, we did a large-scale engagement on trying to understand what the community priorities are. So while one would typically think that the Office of Sustainability would only be focused on greenhouse gas emission reductions, as I'm starting to realize how many times I say this, but we're also focused on equity and community priorities moving forward as well. So what we started doing in the summer was listening sessions, and we had listening sessions with community-based organizations that exist within the areas that are darker red on our climate equity index mapping, and to get what those community-based organizations felt like the residents around them were concerned about, or what their priorities may be, what they wanted to see out of their neighborhoods, and the things that they would want to see either changed or improved moving forward. And these weren't questions based around climate, but instead just based around what are your actual priorities. And then we're taking the burden as the Office of Sustainability to connect those priorities to climate change moving forward, so that when we have these conversations, we're actually talking about what the community priorities are, and we're not talking in terms of what the climate strategy is. And so in that, we also had a community-wide survey, which I hope everyone participated in. If not, it's still open, and I can send the link out to you as well. We have our virtual ambassador program where we have residents or people interested in helping spread what RVAgreen 2050 is doing, and really introducing that to their community. And I like to stress that their community is self-defined. We do not define what people's communities should be. And so just sharing in a way that is relevant to the people that they talk to on a regular basis. I host weekly office hours. So anyone who ever has a question about what's going on any level can sign up to talk to me for about 30 minutes on whatever it is with RVAgreen 2050 that they want to talk about. And then between our roundtable and our working groups, we have 134 participants. So that's a lot of experts talking about this process and helping us build this out to make sure that we are moving forward in the best way possible. And there's also a website and social media. You should all follow us on social media. We have Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and an e-newsletter that comes out monthly. And so our next one is actually coming out next week. So if you want to have a monthly update on what we're doing outside of these meetings themselves, you can sign up for that as well. So what will we be talking about in this group? These are the community priorities that we were able to identify from our one-on-one sessions over the summer. And the only of the 7 of these, the office created one was racial equity and environmental justice. And as an office, we created that topic specifically to make sure that we are constantly embracing racial equity and environmental justice moving forward. This is not something that's second to what we're doing, but integrated into the entire process. And so we don't want to forget the past in the city of Richmond, and we want to make sure that we're moving forward by embracing and understanding what inequities exist in this process. But what we heard from the community is that they would love to see improved engagement and communication from the city of Richmond, as well as organizations that are in their neighborhoods. And so we want to make sure that we are offering up tons of opportunities for people to engage in this process. We want to make sure that we are talking about this in the most equitable way and in a way that people actually care about, so that they're willing to engage in the process as well. The other thing we heard is that there's been a lack of government accountability. There's been concerns about government accountability moving forward. So we're in this plan, we want to make it very clear what the accountability is on our end as an office, on what the city of Richmond moving forward, and that people can follow through and make sure that we are doing what we're supposed to be doing, and we can look to see what we're supposed to be doing and check ourselves as well. Within what people want to see for community wealth, there was a lot of interest in job access, wraparound services, improved out of school time opportunities, and paths towards home ownership. For housing and buildings, the only thing that we heard back as a community priority was affordable housing, which is why that was like our example earlier, because that's something that every community-based organization that we talked to mentioned affordable housing as a community priority in their neighborhood. For neighborhoods, that's really going to be our traditional sense of what infrastructure looks like. So that's going to be transportation in and out, the green space access, and general beautification of neighborhoods, and increase urban tree canopies. And for health and well-being, there is an interest in focusing on safety, clean air, clean water, and a decrease in violence within a lot of these neighborhoods. And so I will also send out a one-pager on this, so you can have a physical copy of what these break down to be moving forward, and where we are going. So what we're doing in this process is we will take the information that we have, and between now and February, we will be drafting our strategies and setting up our foundation for drafting our strategies, and we'll have our large-scale community-wide engagement in March and April of 2021. And then May through August of 2021, we'll be refining those strategies and then just kind of building out from there until April of 2022. So this is a very, very high level view of what we will be doing until April of 2022, but to really help sort of set where everyone is going and what we're hoping to get out of each phase of this planning process. And to really help place where we are, here is a visual representation of how this planning process is going to work out. We have our roundtable in the center, and then we have our community priorities around our roundtable. And if we were really going to do this in the most correct visual experience, our group, the community priorities group, should be in between the community priorities and the other technical working groups. And so we are going to take a lot of the strategies that come from environment, energy, transportation, buildings, and waste, and make sure that they are hitting on at least one of these community priorities before we move forward to assessing whether or not they match lived experience or not. And we will also have, I feel like a lot of people may have heard of SMART goals, but we'll be doing SMARTY goals because we have our I for inclusive and our E for equity, to make sure that we are really operating within the nexus of equity, climate action, and climate resilience. So are we addressing community priorities? Have we reduced greenhouse gas emissions? And did we increase resilience to climate impacts? So these are going to be a lot of our 3 questions that we're going to be thinking about with our planning process. And then just to give another visual representation of our planning flow and maybe really help build in, we're going to take these strategies that come from these other groups, and they're going to come to us first, and then we're going to judge them before they go to the round table, which is then where they go to the community-based for community feedback. And overall, We've had 62 meetings to date with everyone, and this is how we got a lot of these community priorities. And yeah, are there any questions? That was definitely also, again, a lot of information at the end also.
Not a question, but I just want to inform everyone, if you did not see it in the chat, Richard did provide a resource on climate and background information if you would like to review it. Thank you, Richard, for doing that.
I have a question, Kendra. I imagine this could be kind of iterative, right? So if something comes out of buildings, right, to our group, and we find some reasons to send it back, right, to address some issues, then it's going to come back to us after that and cycle that way until it gets there.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So the other groups are also trained in racial equity and have the community priorities. So the goal is on their end for them to actually address these, and we are making sure they're definitely addressing those.
So they're getting the same information we are about what the priorities are, and baking those, should be baking those into them.
Yes. Yes.
Will we get to participate in, excuse my cat here, will we get to participate in some of the community engagement?
Oh yeah, I would love for anyone who wants to participate in community engagement to let me know. So that is always open. There is, I do not believe, a direct ask of working groups to do community engagement, but that opportunity is always available. Great. Yeah. Cool. If there's no more questions, we are at the end. In your email about the meeting, as well as the calendar invite, there's a link to the Google Drive that has all of this information. So the slides are there. And we have all of our recordings will be shared in that drive as well. So if you miss a meeting, the recorded version will be in our Google Drive. If you have any questions or want to tell me something to change about the way this is happening, feel free to email me. And our next meeting is going to be December 18th, Friday, December 18th at 1 p.m. And there is a post-meeting survey, which is an anonymous way for you to say, ask questions or, well, if you have a question, it's not anonymous because I'll need to know who to respond to. But if you just have feedback on something you want to see improved or changed, this is an anonymous way for you to share that information as well. And if no one has any other questions, that is the end of our meeting. And I would like to thank everyone for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Thanks,
have a great one.
everyone.
Yeah.
Have a good weekend.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks. Good weekend, everyone.
Kendra, would you like to stop recording?
Oh, you're right.